The Zoom notification popped up at 7:56 a.m. with the cheerful ding of corporate doom. Quick sync, Ashley D. No agenda, no context, just that passive-aggressive smiley face emoji that every middle-aged guy in America has learned to fear. I was still in my kitchen, coffee halfway to my lips, when I knew exactly what this was. After 18 years at Donovan Systems, you develop a sixth sense for when the axe is about to fall, and this axe had been sharpening itself for months. My name's Jim Caldwell. I'm 49 years old. And in exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds, I was about to become the latest casualty in corporate America's war on institutional knowledge. But here's what that trust fund baby didn't know. I'd been preparing for this moment since the day she walked into her grandfather's company wearing designer sneakers and calling 20-year employees legacy assets. Let me back up. I knew things were changing the moment Ashley Donovan started using the word synergy, unironically during her first all-hands meeting. That smug, overprivileged MBA graduate came strutting in like she'd just invented capitalism, not inherited a corner office from the man who used to call me the backbone of this place. I've seen startup wannabes come and go, but this one had the confidence of someone who's never had to earn her parking spot. 18 years. That's how long I've been with Donovan Systems. I joined back when our servers were held together with duct tape and prayer, and our marketing team was just whoever could make a halfway decent PowerPoint. I was there before the funding rounds, before we outgrew 2 office buildings, and long before anyone had ever heard of Ashley with her lifestyle influencer background. The founder, Thomas Donovan himself, built this company from a folding table in a rented garage. He used to say, "Jim, processes make permanence," and I made sure every process had a paper trail, a timestamp, and a backup. When you've been somewhere long enough, you stop needing a title to know your worth. Technically, I was Chief Operations Officer, whatever that meant to outsiders. Internally, I was the guy you called when procurement stalled, compliance panicked, or legal forgot which version of the charter we were using. I kept the whole machine running without ever needing to raise my voice. Then Thomas got sick. Started fading about a year ago. Quietly at first. Missed meetings, forgotten names, odd silences during board calls. He still had moments of clarity, but the board got nervous. And nervous boards do stupid things, like handing operational control over to Ashley, Thomas's 29-year-old granddaughter, who once asked if we could just chat GPT our compliance reports. I wish I were kidding. From the second Ashley set foot in the office with her athleisure uniform and fake humility, I knew I had a countdown running over my head. She made a speech about modernizing legacy systems while never once looking me in the eye. Her eyes, for the record, were usually glued to her phone, scrolling through whatever crypto influencer was promising to 10x her personal brand. I started noticing things. My calendar permissions got weirdly restricted. People I'd mentored for years were suddenly CCing me instead of inviting me to strategy meetings. And I overheard her in the hallway telling HR I had boomer energy. Here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you time, quiet time. The kind where you revisit old files, pull up those dusty PDFs nobody's opened since 2008, and remember every handshake that ever meant something. Thomas and I had an understanding. He trusted me to safeguard the company's foundation. And buried in those foundations were some very old, very real clauses with very sharp teeth. I didn't fight the shift. I let her replace our vendor liaison with her sorority sister from Kappa Delta. I watched her convert our internal documentation into a Slack channel called Ashley's Vision Board. I even smiled when she rolled out Mindful Mondays like it was a new federal holiday. But what I also did was quietly renew my notary license, dust off a certain 19-page document signed by Thomas in 2009, and begin logging every interaction with HR into a private email thread titled, "When This Trust Fund Baby Fires Me." I knew the final blow would come suddenly. Ashley didn't have the spine for real confrontation. She was more the schedule a video call at an ungodly hour and act like it's routine type. So I waited. And while I waited, I made sure every piece of paper she'd never bothered to read was in order. Every clause she would have mocked had been verified. Every signature was notarized and filed. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preserving structure. The structure she was too privileged to understand. because here's what Ashley never learned in business school, or at least not between influencer workshops and wellness retreats. The person who understands the foundation holds the power to shake the entire house. And I was about to shake it. Now, back to that Zoom call at 7:56 a.m. I clicked join, and there she was, sitting in what used to be the supply closet until she had it remodeled with mid-century modern energy. HR Director Patricia Walsh sat beside her looking like a hostage, pretending her makeup could conceal the dread in her eyes. I gave Patricia a nod through the camera. She didn't return it. Ashley didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Jim," she said, like my name tasted sour in her mouth. "We've been evaluating our organizational strategy, and after a lot of difficult discussions," she actually smiled here, the absolute nerve. "We've decided to sunset your role as part of our modernization initiative." Sunset. She said it like I was a failed email campaign. I blinked once. That was it. No shock, no gasps, no desperate pleading. I just tilted my head the way you do when a child proudly shows you a drawing that's clearly just a squiggle with eyes. The rest was corporate theater, the scripted sympathy, the historical contribution speech, the final insult about staying relevant in today's landscape. But I was already 3 steps ahead, calculating timestamps and courier routes. Because Ashley Donovan had just made the biggest mistake of her short, privileged career. She'd fired the one person who knew exactly where all the legal landmines were buried, and I was about to watch her step on every single one. I didn't need to hear the rest of Ashley's termination speech, but she gave it anyway. "We really appreciate your historical contributions," she added, dragging out the word historical like I was a fossil she'd found in a filing cabinet. "It's important to stay relevant in today's landscape." That last line, that was the gift, the phrase that told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just cutting dead weight, she thought this was a teaching moment. "Consider this your final lesson in adaptability," she said, like she was some startup guru delivering wisdom from Mount LinkedIn. I smiled, tight-lipped, no teeth, no words. Just nodded once and said, "I understand, I'll clean out my desk." "Actually," Ashley interrupted, her voice getting that performative sweetness that consultants use when they're about to screw you, "security will handle your personal items. We're implementing a clean transition policy." Of course they were. I closed the laptop, sat back in my kitchen chair, and laughed. Not loud, not bitter. Just one short chuckle, like finally understanding the punchline to a joke that took 18 years to tell. Then, I opened my banking app and saw that my final paycheck had already been deposited. Ashley had it ready. Smug little overachiever. The timestamp read 7:47 a.m. She'd processed my termination before she'd even told me about it. I clicked confirm on the transaction. That detail mattered more than she'd ever know. The coffee was still warm when I grabbed my keys. First stop, Notary Public. I had the letter already printed, sealed, and labeled for Board Legal Counsel, immediate review. All it needed was the official seal. The notary, Mrs. Williams, a 70-year-old woman who'd been stamping documents since before Ashley was born, raised an eyebrow when she read the first line. "Operational reversion clause?" she asked. "Family business," I said. "Sometimes the kids need reminding about respect." She didn't ask questions, just signed, stamped, and slid it back across the counter. "That'll be 50 ounces." I paid cash and thanked her. By 8:41 a.m., the document was official. Next came the courier. I had arranged same-day priority service 2 weeks ago, not because I knew this exact day would come, but because I knew it would come eventually. The driver was waiting in the parking lot like I'd requested. "Time-sensitive legal document," I told him, handing over the envelope. "Needs a signature on delivery, but only from the company's general counsel. Not HR, not the CEO, no substitutes." He nodded and checked his GPS. Downtown office district, should have it there by noon. "Perfect timing," I said. As his van pulled away, I sat in my car outside the coffee shop across from our office building. I could have gone home, could have started making calls about new job prospects, could have done any number of normal things that normal fired executives do. Instead, I wanted to watch. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Ashley's silhouette in the executive conference room. She was gesturing animatedly to someone, probably Patricia from HR, maybe one of her sorority sister VPs, celebrating, no doubt, planning the announcement of my departure, figuring out how to spin it as a positive transformation. What Ashley didn't know was that the envelope now speeding through downtown traffic contained more than just professional goodbyes or legal complaints. It was a formal notice of termination acknowledgement, executed by the party of the second part, me, per Section 4.8 of the 2009 Operational Reversion Agreement, a clause so buried in the corporate archives that most of legal had forgotten it existed. But I hadn't. I helped Thomas draft that agreement when we incorporated as a Delaware C Corp. He was paranoid back then, terrified that someday the board might be swayed by family pressure instead of business competence. So we wrote safeguards, legal tripwires, checks and balances buried so deep they might as well have been written in invisible ink. That clause stated that if I were ever terminated without full board approval and severance compliance with original charter terms, operational control of Donovan Systems would revert within 72 hours to the founder's trust, and to the appointee listed therein. Ashley had just pulled the pin on her own grenade. She just didn't know it yet. Around 10 a.m., I watched her leave the building with someone from strategy, probably Madison, the other sorority sister she had hired to run analytics, despite thinking a Gantt chart was a type of artisanal cheese. They were laughing, probably heading to that overpriced Atai place down the street to celebrate Ashley's bold leadership move. From my car, I pulled up the company Slack on my personal phone. Someone had already forwarded me the internal thread about my transition. Ashley had posted a GIF of a broom sweeping with the caption, "Spring cleaning season." Out with the old, in with the bold. The reactions were telling. A few fire emojis from the new hires she had brought in. Some diplomatic thumbs-ups from middle management, trying to stay neutral. But mostly just silence from the people who actually knew how things worked around there. Linda Torres from payroll had sent me a private message. "This is insane. You literally built half our systems." I replied, "Sometimes insanity has a way of correcting itself." By noon, I knew the courier had made his delivery. My phone buzzed with a notification, signed and received by Lisa Rodriguez, General Counsel. The timestamp read the 12:03 p.m. I sat back and did the math. 72 hours from 7:59. a.m. Tuesday meant 7:59 a.m. Friday. Ashley had 3 full days to figure out what she'd just triggered. 3 days to realize that firing me wasn't just a personnel decision. It was a legal event with consequences she'd never bothered to learn about. The beautiful thing about institutional knowledge is that it's invisible until it's gone. And Ashley was about to discover that some knowledge comes with teeth. I finally drove home around 1 p.m., but not before ordering a pizza and settling in to watch the show. Because over the next 72 hours, Donovan Systems was going to get a masterclass in what happens when entitlement meets preparation. And I had front row seats to the whole damn thing. The countdown had begun, and Ashley didn't even know she was racing against a clock that had been ticking since 2009. The first crack in Ashley's confidence appeared Wednesday afternoon. I wasn't there to see it personally, but Linda Torres filled me in during our coffee meeting at the diner on 5th Street. She'd taken a sick day, the first in 8 years, just to update me on the chaos brewing inside Donovan Systems. "Legal's been in emergency session since noon," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee with shaking hands. Lisa Rodriguez locked herself in the archives with 2 paralegals. They're pulling governance documents from 2009. I sipped my black coffee and nodded. Probably just routine compliance stuff. Linda gave me a look. "Jim, they found your letter. Ashley's been pacing the executive floor like a caged animal. Patricia from HR keeps getting pulled into meetings she's not allowed to talk about afterward. The beautiful thing about corporate panic is how visible it becomes once you know the signs. Hushed conversations that stop when the wrong person walks by. Sudden strategy sessions that nobody's allowed to join. Legal counsel making multiple trips to off-site storage facilities. By Thursday morning, the whispers had reached middle management. Someone from IT, brave soul, actually asked Ashley directly about document verification procedures during the daily stand-up. Ashley's response, according to my sources, was to laugh nervously and say something about legacy paperwork that legal likes to obsess over. But behind that laugh was the growing realization that maybe, just maybe, firing the guy who knew where all the corporate bodies were buried wasn't her smartest move. Thursday afternoon brought the HR fumble that confirmed my suspicions. My company portal access, which should have been terminated Tuesday morning, briefly reactivated. Not full access, just a window. Long enough for me to glimpse a hastily modified file. My official termination notice, now backdated to Wednesday. 2 full days after Ashley fired me in person. They were scrambling, trying to create a different timeline, maybe hoping to shift the 72-hour reversion trigger, maybe thinking they could massage the dates and make everything go away. Amateur hour. See, the problem with rewriting history is that when the historian kept receipts, you're screwed. I had my original termination timestamp, my bank deposit confirmation, the notarized courier slip, the signed delivery verification, all dated Tuesday. I forwarded everything to my personal attorney with a note, document the documentation. Her reply was 2 words, already done. By Thursday evening, the board had been called for an emergency session. Not the usual monthly review, but a governance clarification meeting scheduled for Friday morning. The same Friday morning when my 72-hour window would close at exactly 7:59 a.m. I spent Thursday night at home, laptop open, watching the internal Slack channels leak information like a corporate Titanic. Someone had started an anonymous thread asking whether anyone remembered founder clauses from the old company charter. Another thread wondered if there was any truth to rumors about succession protocols. Ashley tried to control the narrative with a company-wide message about exciting transitions and streamlined leadership structures. But you could smell the desperation through the buzzwords. Friday morning came with the kind of crisp October air that makes you feel like anything's possible. I was up at 6 a.m., showered and dressed in my best suit, the charcoal Armani I'd bought when we closed our first $10 million contract back in 2018. If I was going to reclaim my company, I was going to look the part. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 8:30 a.m. I knew because Dr. Patricia Moore, the board chair, had sent me a text at 7:15. Jim, legal counsel advises your presence may be required at this morning's session. Are you available? I replied, I'll be there. At 7:59 a.m. exactly, 72 hours to the minute after Ashley had sunsetted my role, I walked through the front doors of Donovan Systems. The security guard, Martin, who'd known me for 15 years, did a double take. Morning, Mr. Caldwell, he said carefully. Thought you were... heard there was some kind of transition. I smiled and tapped my badge against the reader. It beeped green. Lisa Rodriguez had reactivated my access sometime during the night. Transitions work both ways, Martin, I said. Sometimes what goes around comes back around. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like the longest and shortest minute of my life. When the doors opened, I could hear voices from the main conference room, heated voices. The kind you hear when lawyers are explaining to executives that their legal position is somewhere between precarious and completely fucked. I walked past Ashley's office, empty, her laptop bag gone, and continued to the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see the entire board assembled, Dr. Moore at the head of the table, Lisa Rodriguez with a stack of legal documents, 3 external board members looking like they'd rather be anywhere else, and Ashley sitting at the far end, her usual confidence replaced by something between confusion and dawning horror. I knocked once and entered. Good morning, I said, making eye contact with each board member in turn. I believe you requested my attendance. Dr. Moore gestured to an empty chair. Please, Jim, sit down. Ashley stared at me like I was a ghost, which, in a way, I suppose I was. The ghost of institutional knowledge, come back to haunt the living. Lisa Rodriguez cleared her throat and opened the black folder in front of her. As we were discussing, the Operational Reversion Agreement of 2009, Section 4.8, has been formally triggered. The 72-hour window closed at 7:59 a.m. this morning. She looked directly at me. Mr. Caldwell, according to the Founders Trust documentation, you are the designated appointee for operational oversight in the event of unauthorized executive termination. I nodded once. That's correct. Ashley found her voice, though it came out smaller than usual. This is insane. You can't just... This isn't how corporate governance works. I turned to face her, my smile professional, but cold. Actually, Ashley, this is exactly how it works. When you know how to read the fine print. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of a company discovering that sometimes The old guy in the corner office wasn't just dead weight after all. Sometimes he was the load-bearing wall. Dr. Moore looked around the table, her expression somewhere between resignation and relief. Given the legal circumstances and the valid execution of the reversion clause, I motioned to formally acknowledge James Caldwell as interim chief executive officer of Donovan Systems, effective immediately. Seconded, said the gray-haired board member who'd been tapping his pen nervously for the past hour. All in favor? 5 hands rose. Ashley stayed firmly in her lap, her face cycling through the stages of corporate grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, and finally the dawning realization that her 8-month reign was over. Motion carries, Dr. Moore said. Lisa, please prepare the necessary documentation. Ashley stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. This is ridiculous. I'm calling my lawyer. This is corporate sabotage or something. I remained seated, my voice calm and professional. Ashley, you're welcome to call anyone you'd like, but I'd recommend starting with someone who specializes in employment law. You're going to need help understanding your separation agreement. She stared at me, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She was 29 years old, handed everything on a silver platter, and had never learned that actions have consequences. But sympathy doesn't undo 18 years of institutional knowledge, and it certainly doesn't excuse incompetence. You planned this, she said, her voice shaking somewhere between fury and disbelief. You set me up. I stood slowly, straightening my tie. No, Ashley, I prepared for this. There's a difference. Your grandfather taught me that paranoia and preparation are often indistinguishable from wisdom. Lisa Rodriguez slid a manila envelope across the table toward Ashley. Your separation agreement. Very generous terms, considering the circumstances. Full severance, positive references, and a confidentiality clause that protects everyone involved. Ashley snatched the envelope but didn't open it. What about my office, my projects, the rebrand initiative? Will be reviewed and adjusted as necessary, I said. Some changes work, others don't. That's what institutional knowledge helps you figure out. She looked around the room one last time, searching for an ally, a sympathetic face, anything that might suggest this was all a bad dream. Finding none, she clutched the envelope to her chest and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. You know, Jim, you might have won this round, but you're still just the old guard. The world is changing, and people like you are going to get left behind. I nodded thoughtfully. You might be right, Ashley, but today isn't that day. After she left, the room exhaled collectively. Dr. Moore leaned back in her chair and shook her head. Well, that was educational. Jim, what's your first priority as interim CEO? I looked around the table at faces I'd known for years, people who'd watched this company grow from Thomas Donovan's garage startup into a $50 million operation. Stability. We need to reassure our clients, retain our talent, and get back to doing what we do best. And Ashley's innovations? Asked one of the external board members delicately. The good ones stay. The Mindful Mondays and Vision Board Slack channels. Those we can probably live without. A few chuckles around the table. The tension was finally breaking. By 10 a.m., I was sitting in what had been Ashley's office just 3 hours earlier. The mid-century modern furniture was actually pretty comfortable, though I'd probably swap out the motivational posters for something with actual meaning. My first call was to Linda Torres. Linda, it's Jim. How would you feel about that VP of Operations position we talked about last year? Are you serious? Her voice cracked with emotion. Dead serious. I need people I can trust, people who actually know how this place works. When do I start? How about Monday? My second call was to the 3 senior employees Ashley had terminated over the past 2 days. 2 accepted my offer to return immediately. The third, understandably, had already accepted another position, but thanked me for the call. By noon, I'd sent a company-wide email, short, professional, and to the point. Effective immediately, I've assumed interim operational oversight of Donovan Systems. Our focus returns to the values Thomas Donovan built this company on: competence, integrity, and respect for institutional knowledge. Department heads, please schedule meetings with me this week to discuss ongoing projects and priorities. We have work to do. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My Inbox filled with replies ranging from relieved to celebratory. Someone had already created a new Slack channel called Welcome Back Jim before I shut it down. We had a company to run, not a victory party to plan. Around 2 p.m., I walked the office floors, something I hadn't done in months. People looked up from their desks with expressions I hadn't seen since Ashley's arrival: hope, relief, and something approaching genuine enthusiasm. Martin, the security guard, stopped me near the elevators. "Mr. Caldwell," I just wanted to say, "it's good to have you back. Place wasn't the same without you." "Thanks, Martin. It's good to be back." That evening, I sat in my home office with a glass of bourbon. The good stuff. A bottle Thomas had given me when we hit our first 10 million in revenue. I pulled out my yellow legal pad and wrote a timeline of the past 72 hours. Not for legal reasons this time, just for memory. Tuesday, 7:59 a.m. terminated. Tuesday 9.02 a.m. reversion clause triggered. Friday 7:59 a.m. clause executed. Friday 8:30 a.m. appointed interim CEO. The phone rang around 8 p.m., Thomas Donovan's home number. "Jim?" The voice was weak but unmistakable. "Hello, Thomas. How are you feeling? Better now?" Lisa told me what happened. "Ashley overplayed her hand, didn't she?" "She did. But she's young. Maybe she'll learn from this." A pause, then a chuckle that turned into a cough. "You always were too generous, Jim. That's why I knew you'd protect this place when I couldn't anymore. The company's in good hands, Thomas. Get some rest. I will. And Jim, thank you for everything." After we hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled. Not the tight professional smile I'd been wearing all day, but something genuine and satisfied. Ashley was right about one thing. The world was changing. But sometimes change meant recognizing that experience and wisdom weren't just legacy baggage. Sometimes they were exactly what you needed to build something that would last. Consider this your final lesson in underestimating institutional knowledge. The old guard isn't going anywhere. We're just waiting for the next generation to earn their place at the table. And when they do, we'll be here to teach them how the real world works.